Call to order this meeting of the Finance Committee and the Select Board, January 30th, 2025. Our first agenda item is open forum. If anyone has anything for open forum. Nope. Okay, so we'll get right into the review of the FY26 department budgets, and we're doing general government. I'll just go right down the list. Start with Select Board. Anyone have questions?
I don't have any.
Town Manager.
Yeah, I have a couple.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Okay. Chris, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I listened to your presentation back in December, so I capped it. And you used the phrase we have a structural deficit. I'm going to ask you a question I think a lot of people are asking or are interested in. So we have, as I'm checking the revenue figures, we're at probably about maybe 3.5, 3.6% for a revenue increase. And I think next year we've got a revenue, maybe not quite as much, but we still have a revenue. All our revenue seems to be increasing a bit as far as property tax and local revenue. So the question I have is, under most circumstances, that would be considered a favorable economic situation. So what is it that's causing us to have a deficit? If you could be very specific about some of the issues that are driving the deficit beyond our control.
Sure. So we will be giving the revenue presentation at the end of this meeting, so there may be some more information and we can ask some more questions at that point in time. But many of our labor contracts were settled during COVID times when there was very low inflation, and over the past 2-3 years, we've seen very high inflation related to labor and other service contracts that we have. Some labor contracts are looking at more than 3% increase over the course of time to keep up with the general market. So that is one of the structural deficits we're seeing. Also, as you may know, through Proposition 2.5, we can only raise the tax levy by 2.5% per year plus new growth. We're not seeing new growth keeping up with expected expenses, so that is a cause for concern as well. So that's very, very high level. I don't know if you wanted to get into more detail than that.
I mean, that's how much of a factor do the like OPEB and the risk management factors, how much do they play into this?
Sure. Well, we're underfunding OPEB right now.
Okay.
We underfunded it for fiscal 25 because the override did not pass. We're proposing to underfund it in fiscal 26 to keep a balanced budget and not to request an override. And so that is something that we're slipping from. Health insurance always is going up faster than 3.6%. This year it was actually very favorable. Our renewal in November was 8.3%. I'm getting word from Maya and the GIC that they're upwards of 10 to 19% increase. So for us, we're doing actually a little bit better than the market. So those things, we're actually underfunding a lot of things. You'll see continuously in all of the budgets for the town departments, we are underfunding training for our employees. And that is a struggle because we want to recruit and retain our employees, but if we're not properly training them and we're underfunding that training budget, they're likely to go somewhere else, and then we're going to have to recruit and bring in a whole new crew at that point in time as well.
The only follow-up question I have is when you're talking, as we're looking at we've got a pretty broad array of different types of programs that we're funding, and if we were able to recognize some savings from some accounts, and I think the operational side we've gone through pretty well, but if we're able to garner some savings, is there a possibility that you could utilize either the stabilization account or the free cash as a sort of a rainy day fund? Because it sounds like we're going through this volatile period where, you know, some year, some of these things can hit us real hard and we have nothing really to fall back on. I know local aid's gone up a bit, I think, right?
It has, yes, and the state budget came out last week,
Okay.
so we'll talk about that in the revenue
Okay.
presentation. But, you know, our policy is to keep our stabilization and free cash between 5 and 10%. We're not over 10%, we're slightly over 5%,
Okay.
and we can get you the actual percentage if you need that. So that would be in dire straits. We don't see that we're there at this point in time. We do not want to expend those funds if we don't have to.
Okay. I was asking about adding it to adding funds to it above that, just to keep it there in case we needed to go reach
I don't think
into
we
it.
have any capacity to add any funds to free cash
Okay,
at this
all right.
point in time. We're already so lean in our budgets.
Anything else?
No.
Go ahead, Nate.
I just have a general question, which is, both in the town manager budget and in the other, just, I'm not clear. I think I know, but I'm not entirely sure. The salaries of the different members of town government, many of whom we'll hear from today, are those set by you solely, or you with the select board?
So if a employee is part of a collective bargaining unit or a union, those are set through those bargaining agreements. The rates for the non-union employees are agreed upon in the budget and ratified through the select board through our classification and compensation schedule.
Okay, and then is the select board approves the town manager's salary solely? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else on the town manager?
There was one other question, the ARPA funds, you were saying that you were using ARPA funds to cover some gaps in the budget. So what areas will we be vulnerable when these things run out?
So we're no longer using ARPA funds for any salaries.
Okay.
That's finished. And then all of the contracts have been signed for ARPA funds for the next 2 years. So we don't see any volatility or any exposure for ARPA funds. And all of those contracts are basically for services that are extra at this point in time.
So 2 years, they're gonna be gone?
December, we need to spend the funds by December of 2026.
Thank you.
Sure.
We'll go on to the finance committee. Do we have any questions?
I didn't
No.
see our salaries in there.
You missed those, did you?
The same salary to select.
Select board salary,
Yeah, we
yeah.
make twice what they make. Finance department, Dennis,
Town
do
accountant, not the.
okay, and nothing for the finance department? I'm not seeing anything. Okay, town accountant, go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, from reading the review on the budget so far, are we now subsidizing the stormwater enterprise account?
So we are still subsidizing the stormwater enterprise account. It's always been $600,000.
And the reason I asked the question was, when it was presented to the town meeting, it was supposed to be completely self-sustaining, and that was a concern, was that there was gonna be.
It wasn't. It was
My
always
impression
the-
was it was supposed to be
It was
self-sustaining.
always the 600,000.
Was it
because-
600,000?
Yeah, it was always 600,000 was a subsidy.
And with regard to the Robinson School, how about the Robinson School debt? How much of a commitment we made into that already?
We have made nothing because town meeting has to approve it.
We'll be hearing about that in
All right.
2 weeks, on the 13th, when we
Yes.
go over the warrant article.
And you'll be hearing a snippet of it in the capital presentation this evening.
Thank you, that's it, I'm all done.
Okay. Board of Assessors?
Yeah, I got one.
Okay, go ahead.
You only get to talk to the Board of Assessors once a year, so it's, this is the opportunity to do it. The question that I'd like to ask the Board of Assessors is, we've been operating as basically a single-family community, a single-family residence community, where people come in and when they buy the property, they get taxed on their property, and there's a very fixed amount of revenue that we know is gonna come in from that. As we start to move into the rental properties, which look like they may start expanding, how much do we assess the rental property owners with regards to, say, in relation to us? In other words, per person, would the renters be paying less taxes out of their rent than, say, a person who's basically operating a single-family home? And the reason I ask that is, as you increase the amount of people in town, you're increasing the services, and if we're not getting an equitable amount of the tax revenue to that, it's gonna start to put us in a worse hole than we may already be in. So I'm just interested in what the answer to that is.
Will, can you
Yep.
answer that?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for the question, and there isn't a difference. So we have a single tax rate, so we simply value the property, whether it's a commercial property or two-family, single-family. We value it at what is called a full and fair cash value for the year, and then we have a single tax rate. So each year, we have a tax classification hearing, and the select board has the opportunity to make some choices on tax rates and a few other things. But in terms of your question, answering it directly, no, any two-family or multifamily has the same tax rate as all of the rest of the properties.
So per capita, would we be generating the same amount of revenue with a large rental group from these folks, or compared to the residential owners, the residential property owners?
Right, I mean, it depends if you put in an apartment building, obviously that's gonna be more value, so it's simply based on the value, it's not based on whether the two-family or single-family, whatever the value is. So if a 30-unit apartment building goes in, that's gonna gain more revenue than a single-family, yes.
I just have a follow-up that might clarify some of this, Dennis. Does an apartment complex where people are renting, does that get assessed under the commercial method or residential?
Residential, so
Okay.
anything that has habitation to it, whether it's a 1,000-unit in Boston, if it's, 1,000 apartment units, it's under the residential. It's even if you have a split tax rate or a dual tax rate, it still falls under the residential rate.
Okay. Is that,
All right, I mean, my only comment is that I suspect that we probably do not generate the same revenue per capita from rental properties that we would from a house. And the question that begs us a financial problem, because good possibility that services will increase, but we won't have the revenue to cover it. So I just want to make that point.
okay. Anything else on the Board of Assessors? Okay. Treasurer, collector? Legal services? Nate?
Yeah, on legal services, I just noticed that there was the increase in the Labor Council, which was, explained in the document down below. My question, though, is that it seems concerning that the request is for 20,000 when the FY24 actual was at 35, and I'm just hoping you can speak to why that would, what if there was something happening specifically in 24 that isn't going to happen again this year, given that there's a lot of labor contracts coming up.
There were some significant labor matters in fiscal 24 that we do not anticipate to occur in fiscal 26.
Okay.
So we are as conservative as we could be for fiscal 26.
Okay. Thanks.
Anything else on legal services? Human resources?
Sorry, if I could, just so I know, in the budget document, it talks about the health insurance trust fund in this document, but we also have it later on the agenda. What will be it?
Yeah, I would say later in the risk management section if you want to do health insurance questions. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to move on to technology. Town clerk. I don't think, nobody? Thank you, Lori.
Give her a moment to at least say hi.
Hello, Lori, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I don't think so. The permitting department and the building department?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dennis.
So I think the question I have for the building department is, so we're gonna be pushing this stretch code, and I was wondering if, because it has some effect on real estate as well, which affects our finances. So can you provide me with a little bit of a background of what the requirements of that code is gonna be? And,
I'm sorry. I'd like to just start by introducing our new building commissioner, Eric Tardif.
Hi, my name's Eric Tardif. I've been a building inspector for approximately 20 years, worked in Wellesley for 10 and a half, and in Needham for 9, where we did enforce the stretch code.
Welcome to Westford.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to our future in Westford.
Dennis, if, we're gonna get a presentation also on the 13th on the
Okay,
stretch code.
all right.
And there's
I'd
also a
ask-
seminar
Right.
next week
Next
at
Thursday.
Millennium on Thursday evening that will be taped on WCAT as well.
Yeah, I think that might be the better place.
Next Thursday?
Yes.
All right, I'm all done then.
Okay. Nobody else for
No, just, let me-
your
I could do have
building?
one.
Hang on. You got,
Do have
you,
one. Yeah, so,
okay.
to the same, going back to the, there is a question about, I have a question about the impact, financial impact that a large amount of rental units are gonna have here. And we've had conversations about this in the past. You know, there is still a little concern about the amount of acreage that has been allowed for build-out. Can you explain what realistically you can expect in that zone if we start to generate interest in the construction? I mean, what do you anticipate for a build-out there?
So we're talking about the multifamily housing overlay district.
Yeah.
I think I can give you a short-term answer and then a potential long-term build-out, but of course, we don't have a crystal ball.
All right, understood.
So in the very short term, we do anticipate, well, first of all, as of right now, we've not received any applications for an MBTA communities application. We've had a couple of conceptual discussions from prospective applicants. We do anticipate, though, receiving the first formal application within the next several weeks for 37 Powers Road. That's Zom Living in partnership with others. They are proposing a total of 530 units over potentially 2 phases, and they may be in front of the planning board as early as March. Okay, in terms of the district, the potential build-out, there are a lot of variables. We have had active conversations with some prospective applicants, for some of which for over 2 years. But Zom Living is the first. We do know that another candidate that was public throughout the MBTA planning process was for the Westford Regency. They are currently dealing with some site challenges specifically related to wastewater treatment options. So that could be a significant challenge to develop that site, at least at the density that they were looking for. We anticipate that's going to take at least 6 months to a year for them to resolve those issues, if they even are resolvable. There are some other sites that may have additional on-site septic or wastewater challenges, but long-term, it is certainly possible that there could be 2,000 units spread throughout the overlay district. We know that there are some that we've had conversations with. They may be looking more in the 5 to 7 year time frame, but short-term, it's 37 Powers Road for 530 units, and there's the possibility of Neshoba Valley Ski Area as well.
Just one more follow-up question. Just a comment on that is that I think if it approaches that amount of a build-out, that there will be some issues that we have to talk about with finances, because it's gonna be, that's gonna be an impact. The other thing
Just
too-
to interrupt you, I think when we were looking at the zoning amendment for town meeting, the land use department did a very thorough financial analysis to understand the impact of school children, the impact of police and fire and other resources. And if I'm not mistaken, please correct me, do you want to weigh in on that financial?
So we did, so first of all, if there are issues related to water infrastructure, if there are any shortcomings of our system, the town is not on the hook to resolve those. Those burdens would be borne by the applicant. So if we lack that kind of infrastructure, it's on the applicant. We did do an analysis of some of the existing multifamily housing. We looked at what we thought would be some of the best examples, namely the Bell Apartments. We looked at the actual enrollment of school-aged children. It was lower than some people had thought or predicted, so we used that as some modeling. Other things to fact, we did also look at the number of calls per residence. So while it is true that our police and or fire may go to those locations more frequently than other locations, that's because there's a higher concentration of people there. When you look at the actual math and per capita, it's consistent throughout the rest of the town as if it were a single-family residential dwelling. But they're definitely making more trips there. There definitely would be more traffic. And those are some of the things that would get reviewed as part of the planning board review process. Transportation is fair game. If there are deficiencies or improvements need to be made, those can be put on the applicants. I will also note that for many of those developments, unlike, say, conventional subdivisions, a lot of their main access, a lot of their services, such as trash, snow removal, etc., they are bearing those costs themselves privately. So in some ways, the multifamily development actually could be beneficial tax-wise. From a water perspective, it's far more efficient. You look at the number of persons, there's very low, say, irrigation needs as compared to the conventional build-out for single-family detached dwelling. And so, I don't know if that starts.
Oh, that was good, good insight.
And then we did, our assessor was kind enough, he did start to compile a list of some of the largest valued tax properties in town, the school being number one, but of course, if they're the schools. But in the top 10 list, I'd say that I think there were about 6 where they were the multifamily housing developments from the 40B projects, and they were the greatest tax valuation in town.
Okay.
So I think what we plan to do as we go through these projects and these applications, we obviously want to try to monitor that and see if we can get better data for those specific projects.
Now, just to make sure we understand, as far as regulatory authority is concerned, they are exempt from any special permits. You can only do a site plan on them, is that correct?
It is true that for these multifamily housing projects, they can go through the as-of-right permitting process. However, if they are looking for certain breaks or concessions, it is possible that the planning board may have some special permit discretion, but that is only if they're trying to seek something that's more than the as-of-right option. So there is an as-of-right option, and if that's the case, the planning board truly would lack the ability to deny those projects. They can condition it to resolve some of the, if there are deficiencies that we talked about, if there need to be, say, infrastructure improvements, that can be put on the applicants, so.
The last question I have is that we granted or there's a request for $5 million for studies. Could you give us related to these developments, could you explain what that will be used for?
I wish it was, so.
Was it, I'm sorry, 5,000? Yeah.
5,000. Zeros. So.
1,000 here, 1,000 there, you're talking around money after a while.
That is not specifically tied to multifamily housing, but I'm glad you brought that up. So for instance, this year, our line item for planning studies was 0. And so on the timing of our budget cycle is not very convenient with respect to, say, the grant cycle and even technical assistance that we may receive from our regional planning agency. So for instance, every year the state has different priorities going through the grant process. We don't necessarily know them far in advance. We apply for many, many grants. We're not sure what we're going to get. Some of the grants have match requirements, like either a 10% in match requirement. If we don't have any monies in our planning studies line item, it is difficult to secure and win those grants that require an in-kind match. So we basically look at what we apply for in each cycle, and we try our best to estimate if we're really successful, what do we need if there may be an in-kind match. And then also something new this year, we recently received a notice that we are being awarded technical assistance for a number of opportunities through NIMCOG, our regional planning agency. But one of them is to update our open space and recreation plan, which expires in August. But there's an in-kind match associated with that for $15,000. So we're going to have to get a little creative, but you know, those are some of the. It's difficult to make the case for a specific dollar amount. But if we don't have any money in that line item, we're really in trouble if there's any kind of in-kind match. So we can't tell you at the time we submit our budgets necessarily specifically what it is for, and we don't know how many of the grants, if we succeed, are going to require some kind of match.
So they just, it's like a placeholder that you?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a few questions. The first is, just so I can understand on the building department, microfilming service, $4,700 a year. Can you explain what that's for?
So I believe what that is for is it doesn't necessarily happen every year, but they try. I think there was a slip during COVID. They try to, as you can imagine, we have these enormous plan sets. And sometimes they're 24-inch by 36 inches, and sometimes they're, when rolled tightly, they're that big in diameter. So this is a process working through the state that we get the blessing to scan those documents and index them so we have them and we're not taking up all of that storage space. So it saves a lot of room and it makes it more
So
efficient.
this isn't for 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper.
No, sir.
Okay. And then I noticed that in FY24, looks like there was basically a zeroing out of the zoning enforcement inspector, and that line's blank moving forward. Was that a position that was lost and left vacant?
So in that case, I believe it was a part-time position. That person retired. We did not fill that. And there have been some, I don't want to jump ahead, but it relates to some of the questions that we receive for building department. So we have our regular inspectors, and then there are sometimes after-call hours for inspections if, say, there's a fire emergency or an accident and electrical service is in question, or you know, there could just be emergencies or there's sick. So what has happened in the past is for the coverage, unfortunately, it was tied to the line item for that primary inspector. So if there was after-hours work done by the electrical inspector, it would just fall under the line item, the regular salary for the electrical inspector. And so starting in FY25, the finance committee finance department working with the building department, they decided it'd be so much better if you could track the coverage separately from the regular salaries. So we're still in the process of working with our finance director. We have to add some additional line items so we can clearly track whether it's, you know, emergency calls after hours, if it's filling in for people who are sick or out on vacation, so that we can more accurately track this going forward, and we're gonna have better estimates for what we actually need for coverage going forward. But we won't have that information, unfortunately, until the end of FY25, when we have the benefit of a full year of that data.
So just follow up, and forgive me, I'm just trying to follow what you were explaining. So the on-call inspector coverage line, which is doubling this year, essentially replaced overtime from previous year, or how did you manage that?
So to be fair, neither I nor Eric, who's been here about a month, prepared this budget. But the prior commissioner, based on what they were seeing, said this is what we need to have for coverage. Because they did have actually an uptick, I believe, in the after-hours calls. And so when an inspector comes out after hours, they are allotted a certain minimum hours of coverage. And then, you know, so they did see an uptick in that sort of emergency calls, and you can't not staff that. You have to be able to make the calls, send someone in the field, and determine if something is safe. If people can go back in their home, not go back in their home.
I guess I'm trying to I totally appreciate that. I'm just trying to understand how in FY24 there was nothing in that line item, and there was overtime of $590, and now in FY26, to make sure that there's coverage during emergencies, we're at almost 20,000. And it just doesn't. I can't quite put the two together.
I do understand that. I know that some of that was absorbed by position loss and vacancy of in the position, but it was. I don't have a good answer for you for that. I do know that that number is based on looking back what they thought they actually needed.
We can get some follow-up information as well after doing a little bit of research on that. Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else?
There is a question from the public if the Finance Committee and the board are finished with their questions.
Let me get through all of general government and then maybe, or is it?
It's
is it
related
specific
to permitting and building.
Okay, perfect then. That's
Okay.
fine. Yep.
So this is from Heather Fitzpatrick. She asks for the new 530 potential units. How does that compare to how many units are at Princeton and Bell? I don't know if you have those numbers off the top of your head.
So Princeton Properties has, I believe, 200 units. That's the one near the Chelmsford Town Line off Littleton Road. There are 2 Bell apartments. There is Bell Valley, as it was originally, well, as it was permitted. That's the one behind Red Hat. That's 240 units. And then there's the Bell Hills, which some of you may know as Two Robins, formerly Two Robins Road. That one, I believe, has 180 units. So if you take the 180 and you add the 240, it's kind of like those together.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm gonna go on to Conservation Commission and Land Management. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing? Okay. Planning Board?
You said conservation, is there anybody from conservation here?
Matt Salem is on the line.
Available via Zoom or phone call, I believe.
Do you have something for Conservation?
Good
Yes?
afternoon, evening.
Is this
That's
the?
Matt.
That's Matt.
Yep.
It's Matt.
Oh, okay, thank you. Just one question for you, Matt.
Yes,
With regards to the MBTA zoning provisions, do you have free rein to enforce your conservation rules, or are there any restrictions that have been placed on you at all?
so unlike the 40B, the 40Bs, the MBTA community, any development within the overlay district still has to fully comply with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the town's local wetland bylaw. So the commission, I would say no, there are no limitations or restrictions, or both regulations, I would say, are in full effect.
Good, thank you very much.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, Planning Board?
He was here. I think we asked the question.
You all set? Zoning Board of Appeals? Town Hall? Public Buildings and Property Maintenance. I just had a quick question on that, and it was Jeff. There he is. Actually, maybe a Kristen and Jeff question. I had asked in the questions if there was any thought to kind of combining more departments' maintenance into the 199 budget, because when Jeff and I spoke during the budget task force, there might be some efficiencies to be gained, or decreases in costs of certain things if you could manage that all in one budget versus across budget. So if you wanted to.
Sure, I'll start, Jeff, and then please correct me if I misstep or miss anything. So in the fiscal 24 budget, we consolidated the Council on Aging Cameron Senior Center into that budget. Over the past 2 years, we've been looking at facilities overseeing many of the custodians in the town buildings, which is more efficient than the building department heads managing that. We still do have line items for supplies and services for each of the buildings. I think that's smart at this point in time. We'll certainly be looking at how we manage the expenses related to the library when that comes online. We do have 1.5 years to discuss that. And Jeff and I and Dr. Chu have had ongoing conversations about, we currently have a unionized staff who services town buildings, and then a unionized staff that services school buildings, and then the maintenance staff is in the school union as well. So that's something we need to potentially unravel over time, but I think we're making small progress on that. Jeff, did I miss anything?
No, I think you summed it up nicely. As Kristen mentioned, we are making strides each year, I think, to consolidate a little more. We've definitely gained a lot of efficiencies with the ordering of, products, paper goods, cleaning supplies that we use in the schools. And Bill Bennett, our custodial supervisor, who now is taking a more active role in the town buildings as well, he's done a fantastic job of finding efficiencies and working with the town custodians to help support them as best he can. So we've definitely made a lot of strides, and I think we have some more that we can make. As Kristen mentioned, I think the biggest challenge with that will be navigating the different unions that are involved in that process. So I think that'll be an ongoing discussion as we go.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff and Kristen. Anyone else? Nate?
Yeah, we're in public buildings, right?
Yeah.
Christina, thanks. Just hoping for a bit of an understanding on the increase of about 20% in the the expense called just building maintenance. Later on, there's building maintenance services that are kind of categorized, but that one's gone from in FY24 an actual of $18,000 to a current fiscal year budget of 42, and then now a request of 50. And just hoping you can speak to that.
Jeff, do you want to?
We've got three categories or three accounts within the 199 budget that we're seeing some pretty big increases in, and a lot of it is just due for us right sizing our budget because of the inflation that we're seeing. The bottom line is the cost of everything has really multiplied very rapidly on us, and I'm trying to incrementally each year get this budget in line with what we're seeing for costs. The biggest one for us is the HVAC portion of this right now. We had an in-house maintenance person who was with the town for about 20 years, and he handled a lot of our in-house HVAC maintenance. He was out on medical leave for the majority of FY24, and then he retired last June, so we saw pretty monumental increases as far as that goes. We have backfilled that position, but we unfortunately could not find a person with the same skill set that recently retired. The new person, Brad Janae, is doing a great job getting up to speed, but he's got a lot to learn about our buildings, and I think that we're going to see an uptick in that outsourced maintenance for the foreseeable future.
Sorry, is building maintenance?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is the building maintenance line the one that just says building maintenance? It's the fourth one down after water.
Yep.
Is that for outsources? Because I assumed the ones below that were categorized were for outsourcing. I'm trying to just understand what actually, like.
What is it?
What is it? If building maintenance has HVAC, plumbing, electrical, paint, roof, and so on.
I'm sorry, I apologize. My
That's
answer
okay.
might have been a little confusing there.
No worries.
Building maintenance is everything from painting, the cleaning of floors, some of which is outsourced, some of which is done in-house. Routine wear and tear on the buildings that comes up each year. Could be roof repairs, which we do have an individual line item for that, but it's a little over $1,000, which, as you can imagine, does not go very far this day and age with roof repairs. So it's definitely a mixed bag of things that could fall into that particular line item.
And I think also to add, and Jeff, correct me if I'm misstating, fiscal 24 actual to budget fiscal 25, we did incorporate the Cameron Senior Center. So we took money out of their line item from fiscal 24 and put it into this line item for fiscal 25. So that's why you see the jump in building maintenance from 18,000 in fiscal 24 to 42 in fiscal 25. It came out of the Cameron Senior Center budget.
I see. Okay, because the responsibility also.
The responsibility started to lie on the public facilities
Okay.
rather than the Cameron
Right,
Senior Center.
that's great. And then my last question is just the building maintenance fire alarm line. That dropped down significantly for FY25, but then goes way up in FY26. And I'm just trying to figure out what that's from too.
Got retired.
Yeah, so that's correct. Yeah, so what we saw in the last year and a half for years, and this is very similar to what happened with the waste management contract in town. We've had a long-term provider of fire alarm services in town. It was a company, BEF. It was a local company. They were absorbed by a much larger corporation over the last year and a half, and we have seen monumental increases in our fire alarm services budget. Currently, we are in the process. We've got a bid package that we're going to be going out to bid for a full comprehensive fire alarm services this spring.
Great.
And it remains to be seen what exactly that's going to look like, but I wanted to anticipate for any additional cost. Furthermore, as far as that budget goes, our yearly inspections have generated some additional work that we're going to need to address this year at the Cameron Senior Center and the police station. Every 5 years, you need to crack open the pipes of your sprinkler systems and do what's called a 5-year internal investigation. Each one of those buildings is around $5,000 to conduct that internal investigation. So we know we have some pretty large expenditures coming up in the Cameron and the PD this coming year.
Thank you. And then my just last, just so I just don't know what the stormwater utility fee, is that what is paid into that account for
Right, so all of our buildings are required to pay what residents and
same-
business owners are, so that
figured.
goes right into that fee, yes.
That's it. Thank you so much.
John, did you?
Yeah, I had a question. Jeff, do you play a role in the school maintenance also? Maintenance
I'm in
of
charge of the
facilities?
school.
So that's,
Yes.
that's in the other budget, right?
Correct.
Okay. Specialty.
Yeah, as I understand, Jeff kind of does all of the maintenance, but he may not have all of the budget in 199, correct? Okay, yeah.
I forget what the split is,
40 maybe or something?
40, 60 school, 40 town.
but, I
Yep.
couldn't remember the
Yeah.
split, but it's split between the two
Yep.
budgets.
That's one of the major recommendations of the company.
Yes, it was.
Oh, yes. Remember.
Anything else on public buildings and, property maintenance? Nope, okay. Debt service.
I have a couple.
Okay, go ahead, Dennis.
So I just want to make sure, in general terms, we have we have a few issues outstanding already that we're paying down. One of them is the Blanchard School roof, right? And then we also have, we haven't funded it yet, but we will have the library construction, J.V. Fletcher Library. Then we have an item 710, which is non-exempt debt, and there's a series of things there, like the Plain Road Phase 1, Fire Department Tower Truck, Blanchard Roof HVAC, Plain Road Phase 2. What is the status? Explain what non-exempt debt is, and then just explain what the status of those particular things are.
And Christine, feel free to jump in if I misstep. So the non-excluded debt is, there has not been a town meeting vote to raise taxes specifically for those projects. So we absorb the debt in the general fund budget that's approved at town meeting. You asked about the specific status of those projects. Is that correct, Dennis?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So the Plain Road Phase 1 sidewalk construction is underway. Can you just repeat those other
Yeah, there
projects
was
that you have questions on
Phase
it?
2 as well. And then, yep.
Phase 2 is going to be constructed this coming year. It's currently being designed.
Okay, and then there was dam construction and West Street at North Main pedestrian improvement, and those are on the capital budget.
Those are on the capital plan, so those have not been started yet. They have been designed. They will go out to bid if town meeting approves those.
So you have to have, it has to be town meeting approved. We haven't got the funding attached to those yet, is that right?
Right, so that's in the capital budget.
Okay.
Anything else on debt service?
Let me see if there is. No? Oh, one last question. What is the final decision with the nutting fields? Are they going to replace those fields?
That's
So it is on the plan of capital to replace those fields with synthetic turf.
Thank you, that's it for me.
John Fryer has a question.
Oh, John, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me okay? Some people had trouble last week.
No, you're good.
Yes.
Okay. So, if I look at the town budget, and I look at the chart on page 148, which seems to represent all the debt that we have from the enterprises, excluded, non-excluded, what I get out of it is that in FY25, we're actually at a low point for the cumulative debt that we have, if I read the chart correctly. But by FY28, we've gone from what looks like about 5 million up to something that's about 11 million in debt. And it starts climbing sort of this year, but it really kicks in, I guess, 27, 28, 29. All right, and the big things there seem to be non-excluded debt and the water enterprise. Now, presume the water enterprise is related to the PFAS plant.
Correct.
And that's something that we have to do. But the excluded debt, I presume, is probably the library. Does that include anything for Robinson at that point in time? Because that's a pretty large jump from FY25 by the time we get to like FY28.
Yes, so in the chart, it does say, it also includes projections for projects that have not yet been authorized, such as the potential MSBA Robinson School project. One thing to note about the Robinson School project is we do have to authorize the borrowing for the full amount of the project, but we will be reimbursed potentially up to 48% of that. Christine, do you want to add to that?
I think that looking at that chart is really just to try to get an idea of if these things were to happen, if the school ends up being laddered in, that, we know already that the library is authorized, and we have a pretty good idea what the debt will look like. It's getting closer, so those are known things, but there's also always some estimated pieces, and that chart has the Robinson in there estimated. We don't really know the total cost of the Robinson yet. We don't really know what year we would begin paying back the loan for Robinson. So, the debt fall off schedule is a great tool, but you want to just be careful to, understand that it is a tool. So the things that are already bonded, those numbers are sure, but the things that are not yet bonded, we are estimating. So that's just all I'd like to say about that.
That I understand, all right, and I agree, and I appreciate all the work that's been done to make it a tool, but, it doesn't show what's the known versus the unknown, unfortunately, right? I mean, we know what the library is, I presume. We don't know what Robinson is. We probably know what the PFAS plant's going to cost us at this point in time. So if I look at that chart, how would I know what the debt's going to be? Can we say, well, yeah, we know what it's going to be in FY27, but Robinson doesn't really kick in till FY29 or whatever it happens to be. So that's just an estimate at that point. All I'm saying is that that's a big jump in debt, which one way or another is going to affect taxes.
Right.
Dan,
I think
Dan
Dan
can
has,
answer that.
yeah, I think Dan can chime in.
Yeah, John, if you look at the 710 debt service FinCom questions, in one of the responses, there's a link to the debt fall-off schedule. Check that out. It has every bit of information for every current bonding that's been authorized but not yet borrowed, and future projections. And if you go through that, you're gonna find everything you want to see there.
Yeah, I was trying to reconcile those two things together, and I was struggling a bit, Dan. I must confess, but I can take another look at it.
Yeah, I'm happy to meet with you too if that helps.
Okay, maybe we should do that. But all I can say is, the chart on page 148 looks a bit scary.
And the other thing to note is we just went out to bid for the library yesterday, so we do not have the firm library numbers yet. We are out to bid currently for the PFAS treatment plants. Those bids are due back on February 20th. So again, as Christine noted, those two are estimated on this chart at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Kristen, when you said that the Robinson is in here, but that the Mass School Building Authority would reimburse us perhaps up to 48%.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the total cost of Robinson?
Yes.
So not just the portion we'd be responsible for?
Right. We have to
Which
to
makes it a
estimate
little
the
less
total.
scary in theory.
I would hope so.
Yeah, okay, all right, thanks. So,
I should know this.
And that being the case, the non-excluded debt would come down.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what's the placeholder in there for Robinson, the dollar amount?
So at this point in time, we're requesting $1.6 million for the feasibility.
It's just the feasibility study.
And then if that is approved, then we would come back to town meeting for a construction project.
But the
or whatever the feasibility study
Yeah.
says. It may not be a construction project.
But it's just the feasibility
For town meeting.
study that's in the debt fall off currently.
Wait, yeah, I was just gonna say, is it,
No.
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 Go ahead, Christine.
There you go ahead, Christine.
Dan,
Or Dan.
I want to let Dan speak to it.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a placeholder, and it's under the section for SBAD unauthorized for excluded debt. There's just a $30 million blanket placeholder there. We weren't sure what the option is yet for moving forward, but we knew something was out there. So take that with a grain of salt. We're gonna find out more about the project coming up, and we'll update the tables accordingly.
But 30 million is in the estimate
chart.
right now. Okay.
Yes.
Well, this is about a 7-year process, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, so I projected to hit till 2031 at this point. So then, of course, that may move and whatnot. But yeah, it's a very future problem at this point for paying the debt back.
Dennis?
So I have a clear understanding. When you're talking about MSBA reimbursement, you would be talking about a 40% reimbursement on the $1.6 million?
On the total cost of the project. So let's just say the feasibility is 1.6 million. Let's say the construction for round numbers is 100 million. So the reimbursement would be on the total of that.
So it sounds as though we're up 1.6. We have the pony up on our own account, right, with no reimbursement.
At the beginning, yes.
Yeah.
If you move forward with construction, then you would get reimbursed, and we'd roll everything together into the borrowing.
All right.
I think we see that already on the Blanchard roof, because that's an MSBA
Correct.
project as well. So I think you see the debt payments, but on the front end, you'll see like MSBA reimbursements
I've
or
seen that.
something in the revenue, yeah.
But you're talking about here, there's a varying series of alternatives that could come out of this $1.6 million feasibility study. So the $30 million, I'm assuming, is for a full construction of the building?
It's not.
No?
It's just an estimate.
It's a placeholder.
Yeah, I mean, I worked on another elementary school in a previous community that opened 5 years ago, and it was $78 million.
So it could be a lot it could be a lot more.
It could
All
be,
right.
yes. But this is this is a placeholder for now, estimating it.
So the numbers that were talked about at the school committee meeting last week, if I recall, there were numbers talked about between 192 million and 212 million that the schools may require for infrastructure. So please correct me if I'm wrong. That's a large number.
Yeah. John, let's, we're gonna get into this when we have our presentation on the 13th.
Okay.
So instead of speculating, look, why don't we just wait
Just trying to
for
get an
that?
idea.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, we'll have
No
a lot more
problem.
details, I think. But good questions. Anything else? Okay, let's go on to risk management. I'm just gonna do all of those together. Does anybody have anything for
These are risk
health
management.
insurance or
Good.
employee benefits, anything?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Nate?
Yeah, so as I updated the committee last week, just as a committee update about the Health Insurance Trust Fund meeting, and the intersection of the stop-loss insurance and what that means overall. So I guess the questions I would have, Kristen, maybe I could ask you just to speak to some of the process you've been going through, looking at the larger charge of exploring alternatives to where we are right now, and just what you've done and your game plan for moving forward on that.
Sure. I will speak on the brief side because I know you have a lot of business tonight. We did give an update to the select board a few weeks, maybe a few months ago at this point in time when we were looking at the rate increases for November renewal. Through the budget task force work, we noticed that health insurance is obviously one of the cost drivers and certainly goes up more than 3.6% per year. So that is one of the contributions to our fiscal cliff. Currently, the town of Westford is a partially self-insured program. So we have a health insurance trust fund that holds majority of the money where employees and employer pay in the premiums, and then those come out and get paid to the healthcare providers. We also have what's called a stop-loss insurance, which is with a third-party provider. If we have certain claimants go over $125,000 in a year, that stop-loss kicks in. We pay up to the $125,000 through our health insurance trust fund, and then the rest gets picked up through that insurance policy. Over the course of the last year or so, we've been looking at other alternatives, such as the Group Insurance Commission through the state, the MIA, the Massachusetts Interlocal Agency, and others. MIA failed to quote us based upon our experience. The GIC we're still looking at, but has very limited programs that a lot of our employees may not be interested in, and we also have no control over those programs. But there may be some cost benefits to that. I actually was at a conference this past week where the GIC increase is over 10.8% likely that they vote in March. Our increase was 8.3%. And Maya, I'm hearing, is from 14 to 19% for this next round. So again, we're still exploring options. I've had multiple phone calls with Pam Hicks, the HR director, and other consultants to understand where we may be able to help our employees seek lower cost options, maybe do plan design changes, but we have not moved in that direction yet, but those conversations are continuing. We're dedicated to making sure that we provide the best health insurance for our employees and also provide the most cost effectiveness for our taxpayers.
There was talk about going out to bid for a new broker. Did that move forward?
It has not moved forward yet. So we felt that with the 8.3% rate, that we're doing fairly good, but I still am continuing to have discussions with with consultants or brokers to see what we may be doing in the future. So it's not off the table at this point in time.
Anything else?
No, I think it's good.
Okay. Well, we are ahead.
John Fryer has a question.
Oh, John, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just one quick question. Dan, you answered this when I posed the question about closing the gap, I guess, in the unemployment benefit contribution. I'm sorry, I thought it was the pension contribution. That we're going to close it by like 2036 or something like that. But when does it actually start to close? Because it's opening up from 375 to 681, almost 682 in FY26. When is it projected to start closing? Next year, FY27, or?
Are you talking about the retirement assessment, Sean?
Yeah. The chart on 155.
I think
Okay,
maybe there's confusion between OPEB and the
Post-employment.
pension
Yeah, the
retirement.
yeah.
The OPEBs.
Yeah.
Okay, the OPEBs, which are health and small life insurance policy for retirees. So we're contributing right now, which is good. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But we've been hovering around the $1 million mark for quite a few years now since COVID and the inflation hit. It's a very, very long term funding solution. We're talking 2070s, 2080s, and whatnot is what most of the schedules are projecting. But first, we have to fund the pension obligation first, which is closing by 2036. Once that happens, it's going to free up room within the operating budget because instead of paying this higher than normal cost assessment, all we have to do is pay the normal cost of the pensions moving forward. So there could be $7-10 million open up that we then could start addressing more towards the OPEB at that point in time.
Right. So when do we start to close the gap?
2036.
We don't start to close it until 2036.
Well, it's going to keep growing until we can contribute more than the normal costs that are accrued each year. So we need $3-4 million a year in there not to lose ground.
Oh, okay.
John, there's
All
two
right.
different funds. They're two separate funds. Maybe a phone call. It confuses me too. I just know that there are two different funds that we're closing in on.
Okay. All right.
Christine, do you have something to clarify or?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that we are required to have our pension fund fully funded by 2040, and we're on pace to have it funded by 2036. But the OPEB, we are not yet required to be funding. So the fact that we're funding it at all puts us in a better position than some towns and will help us when we get to the point when they change the legislation to say, okay, now you have to fund OPEB. So,
All right. So
just a little clarifier.
So perhaps I missed something. The pension fund, does that show up anywhere in the town budget?
No, it used to be a county retirement system. It's Middlesex Retirement now, And it has, I believe, 71 municipalities and districts that
Okay.
contribute into it, yeah.
So it's essentially out of our control, that part.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an
Okay,
it's
all
an
right.
assessment.
All right, thank you very much. I apologize for the confusion. But
That's
No
good.
problem.
You didn't cause it.
Yeah. Anything else on risk management, health insurance, any of that? No. Okay, so we'll go on to the FY '26 Capital Planning Committee presentation.
So Dan is going to bring up his screen. I am going to give the presentation, save Dan's voice a little bit, so he hopefully can give the revenue presentation. But I'm prepared to give both if needed.
Alrighty.
All right, Dan, we can see your screen. Thank you. So just want to thank members of the Capital Planning Committee for their work over this cycle. They've had many meetings that we'll go into to review the department's capital requests and offer a recommendation for me to assess, to build into the budget. And then again, we will have more conversation about this when you review those articles leading up to town meeting at your next Finance Committee meeting. Go ahead, Dan. So like I said, we had 5 meetings from October through January to review the fiscal 26 capital needs and any 20 to 27 to 2030 projects that should be considered moving forward. We had most of those projects receiving bids or quotes. We just want to note that those were real-time bids or quotes, and they may be subject to change based upon the market or the conditions. We also coordinate with other boards and committees on these asks because funding could come from a variety of sources. There could be community preservation funds. The Permanent Town Building Committee would review any projects over $50,000. The Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee comments on applicable projects if there's a conversion or a request to conversion. The school committee weighs in on those projects that are associated under their realm. The library trustees and pedestrian safety, same thing if it's under their realm and their charge. And then there's a lot of integration with DPW as they manage a variety of projects from water to stormwater, highway, and engineering. And then we have done a thorough evaluation of available grants and other funding sources related to the capital plan, so it is not all coming out of the general fund. So just to give another high-level input, we had, again, a lot of input from department heads and committees. This year, we improved the capital planning database. We included several fields related to how departments felt that those funding sources were going to be coming in, if they felt funding would come from Chapter 90 or community preservation or the general fund or a grant. We also integrated the draft strategic outcome areas from the draft strategic plan that we've been working on with the select board and various boards and committees and the public to understand how we're driving towards those outcome areas to be successful for the town. The current capital stabilization balance is $568,000 approximately, and we have numerous projects being recommended to fund over $13.8 million. There's certain categories. There's the pay-as-you-go, which is utilizing free cash. There's general bond funds, so non-excluded within the general fund. The enterprise retained earnings, so recreation, water enterprise, ambulance enterprise, community preservation funds, Chapter 90 funds, the Fair Share Apportionment Act, which I actually just contacted Rep. Arciera's office today because we have not heard anything on our fair share, and we heard in about the January timeframe last year on that. And then we have the Cemetery Expendable Trust as well. We always ask our departments to look out a period of 5 years related to capital requests, and we're continuing to build on this. That exceeds $57 million at this point in time. We're still not through our facilities assessment projects, so we hope that we can refine that over the course of the next 6 months. And then again, just there's so much detail that's provided by each department that allows these committees to really vet the projects before they move forward to town meeting. So this slide you likely cannot read, but it is based upon the departments and the requests and the asks. And it varies by year to year because some things are cyclical and other things are not. So you'll see at the bottom of the column to the left, again, that's that $13 million ask at that point in time. You have these slides in your packet, so I don't feel like I need to go through them in detail unless there's any questions specifically. So these are the capital requests. We have town computers, that is a standard ask. School computers, again, a standard ask. Server and storage replacements, standard ask. Replacement of town copiers, which we are asking for the full amount at this period of time, but we will be phasing that in as it makes sense related to our facilities assessment and related to the age of the copiers. We use these longer than it would make sense to lease that, so that was one of the conversations we had with the capital planning committee. We need to replace a pump station, a pump at the DPW for their water, pumping up the hill. Replacement of an air conditioning unit at the IT building. The police department is asking for their taser replacements. This is the first replacement since they have implemented tasers. There's a request to replace the Namnasset Library rooftop HVAC. The Robinson School curbing is crumbling. There was questions of why are we doing this if we're entering into the feasibility study. Again, as John alluded to, this could be a 7-year process. We want to make sure that that property is safe for the users there, and we felt that this is short dollars to ensure that at this point in time. The school generator at Blanchard needs to be replaced. The Abbott wastewater treatment plant needs its boiler replaced, and the building associated with it needs to be replaced. I'll note that we are looking at the Abbott wastewater treatment plant boiler to go all electric, and we may have rebates for that, so that ask of $40,000 may go away, but we wanted to keep it as a placeholder for this point in time. The dam improvements by the engineering department is a standard ask. Pleasant Street Patton Road sidewalk design is a new ask. There's a new ask for a bucket truck. This would replace an existing vehicle that we currently use on an everyday basis in the DPW. The bucket truck would also be used with the facilities department and potentially other departments to reach hard to get areas. And then there's a plows request for various vehicles. So that total, this is the pay-as-you-go category of just under $2.7 million. So that would be the free cash. Go ahead, Dan. The next categories are community preservation, enterprise accounts, general fund bonds, and revolving accounts. The Community Preservation Committee has started their meetings. I believe they met on Tuesday evening, where they considered a lighting replacement project at the WA Athletic Complex as well as the VFW field. We worked with both Jeff Goodwin and Kyle Fox to combine those into potentially one bid for one vendor to be more cost effective. The enterprise fund is primarily for water, utility truck with a plow, leak detection equipment, new source investigation, that's new well source investigation, the Forge Village number 1 and 2 pump station upgrades, security cameras, so those are all water. Recreation vehicle, this is again a placeholder. Throughout the process, we have been working with our police department to understand if they could free up an old police cruiser to go over to recreation. They're 98% sure that that will occur, but again, we just wanted to keep this in as a placeholder. We explored electric, hybrid, and general gas vehicle, so this is the pricing, the middle of the road pricing for that. The Stormwater Enterprise is looking to fund the Reed Brook and Acton Road culvert construction. And then the Ambulance Enterprise is looking to fund 3 cardiac monitors to replace obsolete equipment. Then under general fund bonds, a fire engine rescue pumper. I just want to be really clear that we're still on a 3 to 4 year ordering schedule for this type of equipment. Our engines are very old at this point in time. We are seeing failures, so it's really important to continue to plan out for this equipment, as it's not just Westford who is seeing those delays in construction. We talked a little bit earlier about the Robinson School MSBA feasibility study, so that's included in this at $1.6 million. The West Street and North Street pedestrian improvements for $800,000, and then the Nutting Road Community Field synthetic turf replacement at $2 million. And then finally, under the revolving or other, We have the pavement management plan for fiscal '26, the pavement management program, that is the actual paving and the scheduled repair. We're going out to bid for that at this point in time. We reevaluate our pavement management plan on a frequent basis. There's a request for a 6-wheel dump truck with a plow with a swap loader, a 6-wheel dump truck with a plow, and then a 1-ton dump truck with a plow. So those are all likely Chapter 90 allocations.
I have a question, just about the pedestrian improvements. Is that 800,000 for the actual improvements, or is that like a study or plan?
That is for the actual improvements. So through this, we have reviewed projects in detail that the capital planning committee and or the requesting department decided was not necessary or we could not fund at that point in time. We're looking to hold off on the middle school Wi-Fi improvement project. We're going to hold off on the day school locker replacement project until we understand what's happening with the Robinson School feasibility study. Again, as I stated before, the Abbott wastewater treatment plant request of $40,000 may come off related to that National Grid incentive, and the recreation vehicle may come off related to that replacement if we can have a good cooperation with the police department. Next slide, Dan.
That's the end.
That's the end, perfect. All right, so we'll take any questions if there are any. Again, these will all be under the warrant articles as well for your consideration.
And just to add to this, so when capital planning voted on everything, we separated out the recreation vehicle and the bucket truck. I actually voted against those two. I was the only one that voted against, just full disclosure. I think it was 8-1. The rec vehicle I voted against because I wanted to let the town hall departments flesh out a little bit more whether they could share the 4 other vehicles that are in that campus. The possibility of using a retired police cruiser versus buying a new vehicle. And then this is just a little more in general. I have some concerns about the maintenance of our vehicles, more in the smaller departments, because it gets put onto the department head. I actually don't think that's really fair. And so I would like to see a little more comprehensive kind of vehicle maintenance plan for some of those smaller departments before we go investing in new vehicles. So that's why I voted against that one. The bucket truck, it absolutely makes sense to have a vehicle like this. But in our financial climate right now, this would be an add to the fleet.
It's actually a reduction.
See, but
it's an even swap.
Right, except that Kyle said that he wasn't gonna retire the sign truck right away. So it was gonna be an add.
Temporarily.
I think it was temporary.
Maybe temporarily, but we don't have a bucket truck now. We never have. It's an add to the level of service. So again, maybe in the future it makes sense. Personally, I thought maybe we should wait, but then again, I was alone. So, take that for what it's worth.
Well, I think that's a good idea. Just timing. Maybe we do that next time. Going forward.
That is, that was my thought, but again, I was 8-1. So.
That's a question. If there was a project. 2 projects. One I know is in progress right now. The Jack Walsh Court Center Recreation. That's not part of this because it's already
allocated.
Accounted for and allocated.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. What about the in the same location there? There's been a number of neighborhood meetings with the town on pedestrian safety improvement. Mm-hmm. Is that also already allocated?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Dennis, do you have something?
Yeah, I do. I have. I can take a little of a strategic view of this thing. You just described to us that we have a couple of commitments that we're looking at. We're going to be employee contracts looking for over 3% some years on this. We have a situation with debt that's going to hit us in a couple of years. We have always have a health insurance question, which is volatile. We don't know what's going to happen from year to year. We have our OPEB permits, commitment that we have to make along with our retirement commitments. So we have a lot of financial stress on us in that regard. And, you know, we've done a pretty good job, I think, of going through each of the departments and squeezing them for as, I mean, there's always you can squeeze some of them more, but I think we've done a pretty good job of, you know, trying to get them to come up with as much money as they've got inside. I think this, for example, the school committee did a great job trying to prepare that guidebook. One of the areas that you can save some money at is in capital spending, all right? And we've had as you just indicated here, we've had over $50 million on 5 years plans going a long ways. But the financial situation that we're facing now is not the same as it was, say, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. So when I'm looking at this, I'm saying to myself, are all these particular capital planning requests of the same magnitude, or the same order of priority? And I know this is a hard thing to do, because I remember having done it before myself, but sometimes you have to say, look, we can't do this year. Now, we had the same issue last year with the Department of Public Works, and they put in multiple vehicle requests. We're talking here over $1 million, maybe $1.5 million of trucks. The question I have is, how are they managing that fleet, right? I mean, there should be, we understand that you can take maybe 2 trucks a year, even can be replaced, but when you come in every year with 4 or 5 or 6 trucks that need to be replaced, I call into question the way that fleet is being managed. That's my thing. So I'm looking at this, and I think we have to do some real hard look at this, all right? I mean, the bucket truck, I think you did a good vote, but I think it has to go more than that, all right, to be honest with you. And so I just want to raise that and offer my suggestion. That's what I'm seeing from looking at the budget, okay?
I will speak in favor of DPW that they had purchased many vehicles at a one slot in time. It was not staggered at a period of time. Now we are trying to stagger those. We've had a lot of our loaders, our dump trucks go out for maintenance, and they've been off the road. So I know that we are in very tough financial times, but I think the departments have delayed and delayed and delayed their capital requests, and I think we have asked departments, what are your priorities? These are all the top priorities that the capital planning committee reviewed. We had several things fall off that were not the #1 priority. So in speaking for our departments and for the best interests of the town to make sure that we have reliable equipment to serve our residents, I think this is an appropriate capital plan for this town meeting.
Okay, so now I'll take a look at the other things. There's other issues on here. For example, some of the sidewalk improvements and things like that, all right? We've gone on for years without the sidewalks. It's a good thing to have if we have the money, if we can do it. But, I mean, you know, and I'm just looking at what you're telling us, right? Something has to give, or you're gonna go back out and try to ask for override, and that's gonna create a whole nother series of issues. So, I just think that there's some hard, I mean, when these folks provide the requests, and they come into you, and I know you have a hard job, I don't envy you at all, somebody's got to be able to say to them, I'm not gonna make it this year. This next year we'll do it. Because if you don't do that, you're just gonna go overwhelmed. You know?
And we have done that,
Okay.
John, if you want to speak.
Yeah, we have done that.
All right.
All along. Well, some of these, for example, some of these sidewalk things are safety issues. You know, the
Yeah.
one down Wallace Field, and then the other one up there around the church. So, I mean, they come in with their priority list, and we go down and we take a reasonable look at it. And this is a heck of an improvement, the way this has been handled since about 2008 when we started this, I think, 2009. Before that, what we put in, $1.5 million for capital back before that? And that wasn't
As long as I've been
nearly
in sport,
sufficient.
we've put pretty good money.
And so some of these things are wearing out, and especially, you know, you look at the fire trucks. I mean, you put an order in, I think we just put the order in for the ladder truck. It's gonna be 3 or 4 years, I think, right? 3 years, isn't it? 3 years. There's a big line, and these things are wearing out. So, I think the committee, from my view, did a real good look at it, and it's a reasonable, proposal. Now, you can nitpick it a little bit, you can go down there, but where do you start? You're gonna be goring somebody's ox here when you get into it. I think
And I
it's
would
good.
agree, with my 2 exceptions, the rest of it,
Yeah. I think you have a point, though. You know, we're using you know, free cash for some of this. I mean, there may be a point where we have to shift some of it, but.
I mean, I think
this is a good one.
the more that you can put into free cash or whatever, I mean, to keep it there for, like I say, like they do at the State House, a rainy day fund, right? Because you don't know what's gonna get hit.
Well, we
And-
fund that. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got to, we maintain that, yeah.
You're funding this capital stabilization
Oh,
fund.
yes. Yeah, and then not only that, the town fund, we have what in reserve, 5 million, 7 million, something like
I don't have the
that? Yeah.
So what happens if you enter into a contract negotiation with some group that is really expensive? Okay, so where are you gonna get the extra cash from? You know, we have to have.
It's my
you know,
goal not to do that, to be honest. And I have guidance with from the select board, so I don't want to show our hands in anything, but my goal is to be as fiscally
All right,
responsible
well, that's
as
good.
well as.
I'll accept that, but
Okay.
I just wanted to say, I can see, you've been watching this for a while now, and you can see where the ebb and the flow's going, so.
Yeah, but you make a good point, and we just need to keep that in mind as we go forward and make the decision based on.
Go ahead, Nate.
priorities. Yeah.
Just a specific question on sidewalks. Does the DPW own a sidewalk clearing, snow clearing?
We do not, so that has been a topic of conversation. We
For many years.
currently
For several
contract
years.
out for a certain number of sidewalks throughout the town.
Well, not the new sidewalk in Carlisle Road, I'll tell you that much.
No,
'cause
that is
every
correct.
day I almost, you know, as I drive it, there's a lot of people walking on the road right next to the
Yep.
brand new sidewalks because they're completely impassable. And to me, it's sort of sending, you know, good money after bad to invest in the sidewalks to
No,
push
we-
people to
We
the road.
certainly, the pedestrian safety committee, the select board, we have talked about that for a couple of years now. Frankly, it just has, you know, it goes to what Dennis is saying,
Ebbs
to
and
be
flows,
honest with
right.
you. But what I do think, Nate, is as we build more sidewalks in this town, which we are doing, we need to consider that, because if you have sidewalks that nobody can use for 5 months of the year or 4 months of the year, then it does become a safety issue. So I think, as I said, as we look at more and more sidewalks, we have to consider that we need to figure out how we're gonna keep them clean. I mean, especially, you know, part of the reason for the sidewalks along Plain Road is so the kids could walk to Nabnasset. And if we don't clear those sidewalks, then they can't walk to Nabnasset, so.
In which the DPW does have
know
a
that-
prioritization map of,
Yeah.
you know, their
I
first
think-
priority is getting to schools and town
and town hall,
buildings.
and town buildings.
They have assessed the cost of not only purchasing sidewalk clearing equipment, but also the cost of the staff associated with that. So it's not just the equipment, but we don't have adequate staffing levels to clear those sidewalks. Especially with the override not passing, are down an additional DPW staff. So it's not just the equipment, it's the overall program. But that's certainly on our radar, and hopefully we can fund that in the future. It's just something that we're unfortunately not able to fund at this point in time.
I would just comment that I share some of the concern about the number of new trucks at the DPW and elsewhere in general. But I also think that, you know, with 3 trucks listed here, folks at town meeting and probably, you know, from what you're hearing here, at least some of us on the finance committee would feel even more comfortable to say, well, something like a brand new utility, like a sidewalk clearer, knowing that's a problem that needs to be solved, has a different sense to it from a prioritization than let's just get 3 more dump trucks, and that you know, just how do we think that through from the perspective of, you know, when you're in a town and you see a problem and trying to fix it.
Yeah, I think we'd be happy to tour anyone on the finance committee through those trucks, and you can see the conditions of them, and they are getting worn and getting tired. And Kyle does have a whole prioritization plan of when he plans to replace the fleet that he started when he joined us 2 years ago. So we're happy to share that with anyone for more information.
And the last thing I would just say is I don't know if we've looked to other towns around that do sidewalk clearing, but I know the Chelmsford DPW has long done sidewalk clearing by the DPW in that town. Maybe a sense of the cost per mile of sidewalk or something could be.
Well, some of these trucks are we're using Chapter 90 money.
Yes, that's correct, yep.
Chapter 90, and then a lot of the other, you know, a big part of it, CPC funds has been great, the enterprise funds, these are not necessarily coming out of the general fund. So, I mean, well, they come out of the general fund, but.
Sign a waiver and let some old guys go out there and shovel it.
Like in Boy Scouts.
I think
Beth has a question. Beth, go ahead.
I was just, I think I had a question about the Nutting Road turf field. Was that decided to be synthetic by the Recreation Department? Was that what they recommended?
Yes, that is correct.
Football.
Okay. I'm just concerned that we're gonna see more like PFAS infiltration in our water system from like synthetic turf. So was that addressed at all?
That has been part of the conversation. I'm not 100% up on all of the details. I know that there are different materials now than were available when the fields went in, I believe, 10 plus years ago, and those other alternatives are being considered with this design.
Okay. I just don't want to contaminate our water even more with PFAS, you know, and we're gonna have to treat the water, so.
That has been a topic of conversation with the Parks and Rec Commission.
Anything else for capital planning? Okay, revenue?
All right. Dan, do you want to do revenue or do you want me to do it?
Why don't I start? If I start going, then feel free to hop in.
All right, let me bring it up for you.
Sure.
Management.
All right, so here we have the revenue projections for FY 25 and 26 and quite a detailed history going back. What this report shows is how we balance the budget from year to year. So it doesn't include all the revenues within the town, it's just the ones that we use to balance the budget. So in this first slide here, it's just showing the different types of revenue that we get. It's property taxes, local revenue, state aid, any appropriations from free cash, and then our enterprise revenue and other available funds. Next slide, Kristen. All right, here's just another summary, showing a little more detail that you can peruse in your own time. All right, so the property taxes are, of course, our largest source of general fund revenue, making up 77% of that total. That percentage has increased over the years as state aid has not kept up at the same pace. And the most important thing here is just so everybody knows how we calculate the tax levy. It's, you know, we have the tax levy, we add on the 2.5%. Any new growth is added on top. There is an override, it gets added to that total. And any debt exclusions that we have out there, whatever the debt payments are for that year, certified by the DOR, that is added to the total of that levy as well. So, local revenue, it's our smallest section of revenue, but of course we have the most accounts in here, so it'll take a little time just to go through to familiarize all of you with this. You can skip to the next page, Kristen. All right, so motor vehicle excise is our largest source of local revenue. We have seen some increases in the past years. If you look at the language up top, our number of bills are going up, and the value of the vehicles are going up as well. So in our 26 budget, we have almost 4.4 million earmarked after collecting 4.35 million in FY 24. The bills are going out in February, so keep an eye out for those. Local options are our hotel tax, our meals tax. Back in 2012, the town adopted at town meeting a local option to add 2% on top of the hotel tax. It went from 4 to 6%, and then a 0.75% on meals tax. And we have rebounded nicely since COVID took over. We're actually at all-time highs for both meals and hotel. Hotel is up 35,000 from the same period a year ago for just those first 2 quarters, and then meals is up 18,000 from that.
Next slide, Dan.
Yes, please. All right. So penalties and interest. This is a slide that shows the amount that we've collected in since going back to FY17. You know, you see the interest rates on the late payments up there. Those are by statute. The legislature intends them to be punitive, so people pay on time and keep the town solvent. It's never fun to collect, but it is necessary just to make sure that those bills are paid. We're logging a little bit behind projections right now. You see we only have 72,000 halfway through the year against the budget 225. That should pick up a bit once the motor vehicle excise bills are passed due. So we should see that turn around a little bit. And then down below we see payments in lieu of taxes or pilots, and those are agreements that the select board have entered into with different entities within town, where they pay a fee or a set amount rather than do the property taxes. MIT has been our biggest contributor for the longest time. If anybody has any questions as we're going through this, feel free to ask too.
Sorry, can I ask a question on that one? Just out of curiosity,
Yes.
what do you know what portion of that is MIT? Just trying to figure out or how many pilots there are.
Yeah, there's a handful of very small pilots. Like there's like $100 one at Meadowbrook Farm. So I'd say the MIT probably makes up about 90% of all the pilots.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right, next page, Kristen. So fees. I'm sure you can all read that really well, but fees are tracking pretty well right now, a little bit ahead of schedule. One thing that we've seen with less real estate transactions as interest rates have increased. So we see things like our MLCs go down. However, we have seen an increase in the bulk stickers there. They got increased from $5 to $15 on July 1st. So we've already raised over $12,000 in revenue halfway through the year against a budget of $17,000. So we are seeing more revenue coming in for that increase. All right, a couple small ones here. We have the cemetery revenue. We usually range between $27,000 and $44,000 per year for this. And then the other departmental revenue below there, that's just the lease for the day field where the community gardens is located. All right, licenses and permits. This is one that varies quite a bit depending on what's going on with growth in town. We've collected about 60% of the projected building permits through 6 months, which is great. And that's despite having the building commissioner position vacant for a couple months until Eric joined us in December. However, just to keep an eye on our projection for FY26 is at 1.37 million. So we're falling a bit short of that. So hopefully, we have a solid spring, and then we have a little bit of wiggle room probably with other local revenue, with the motor vehicle excise, and with a little bit of increased state aid coming in too. So we have to keep an eye on this figure here and continue tracking that. All right, next page. We have special assessments. These are just betterments that we have a schedule that those residents pay back over time. It's a very small amount. And then below we have our fines, with the largest being the police, of course. As long as we don't have a shortage of police officers, the fines usually bring in a pretty good amount from motor vehicle citations. One thing I will say is that at the annual town meeting, we are looking at the animal control fines, so you'll see an article coming up on that in our general bylaws. All right, this is my favorite slide every year, the investment income. So since 2022, the Fed's raised rates 11 times, and we've seen our investment income skyrocket over that time, which has been great. However, in the past year, the Feds have dropped rates 3 times, so we're kind of coming into this little zone here. We're in between 4.25% and 4.5% most of our investments, but we seem to be right on target with our projection for FY26 at 594,000. For years and years, we basically made about $100,000 a year on this or less, and so this is kind of like a bonus to be actually collecting money from investment income at this point. We do have to be careful going forward because the Feds will most likely continue to lower rates in the near future, so this is not a long-term growth account for us. All right, then just some miscellaneous recurring revenue here, and these are items that we can budget for. They do recur each year. This top section here, this is just for the history. This was a program that the MSBA put on. They're actually called SLUGs, State and Local Government Securities. where the state fronted us the $19 million to build the 3 schools back in 2001, and we got to amortize that over the years and get some interest off it as well to help pay for the debt service over those years. But that's since ended in FY23. So if our local revenue looks inflated, starting before or for FY23 and before, it's because we had this extra money come in for that. So I like to leave it in there just so you know the history. And then miscellaneous recurring revenue below here, we have a couple different types of revenue that comes in every year that's, kind of miscellaneous. We have Medicaid receipts, the Neshoba Tech officer for the SRO, and let's see, we participate in an ambulance program where we make up some of the lost revenue from Medicaid. So all those go to help balance the budget at the end of the year. Next slide is miscellaneous non-recurring revenue, which we cannot use to balance the budget. So these are items that aren't planned, we're not budgeted for, and what happens at year end is that they just they close out to free cash, which is good for our capital plan. One note is on this in rebates, we have 178,000 that came in. About 90 some odd thousand of that was from some weatherization upgrades at the Miller and WA. Where on the grant application we actually checked the wrong box. We wanted that check to go to our contractor. So at town meeting, we're gonna have an article where we authorize those funds so we can reimburse our green communities account to make that whole because we had to pay the contractor. So most of that will be reappropriated, but just through free cash at the end of the day. So, but that was at no cost to us. This is the last note. Local revenue, this is a summary of what we've done in the past few years. A couple pie charts. I tried to put every type of chart I could think of in there. And then a nice summary at the bottom just so you can see trends. All right, so getting into state aid, we did receive the governor's budget last Wednesday. It actually got posted on Thursday. So for Chapter 70, we're seeing our highest additional per student allocation at $75 that the governor's ever awarded. So normally it's $30 to start and then they work from there. So 75 is a very good start to the process. We had budgeted 60, so it's slightly above what we had projected. So that $75 per student equates to an additional $475,000 this year, which is great. So we're not used to seeing that much, especially with all the minimum increases we've seen. For unrestricted aid, there's a 2.2% increase. They're not expecting, as much growth through the state for the next year, so that's a little bit lower than we've seen in the past. That's about $57,000. But overall, state aid's going up $442,000, and then our state assessments, which are amounts that the state actually withholds for certain services they deliver, they're actually going down by $22,000. So that helps the general fund as well. So overall, it's about a $465,000 increase to the general fund, which is very good. We haven't seen that starting off with the governor's budget before.
Good.
If you go to the next page, Kristen. All right, here's just a chart showing all the amounts that we've received here in the past years. Just summary, just to see trends. Go to the next one. Just a bar chart, just to show there. The one thing I will point out is that the school construction, that was tied to the Westford Academy remodel. So that went away once the debt service was paid off. So if you want a true trend, just look at the green and blue sections and you can see how state aid has increased. And the past 3 years, it has actually had a pretty substantial increase, which is great.
Danny, what do you mean by offset items?
Offset items. Oh, so that's the school choice for the schools and a small amount for the libraries. It's about $60,000.
Okay, thank you.
Those are funds that are allocated directly to the schools and library that don't need an appropriation to spend.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. All right. And now we're on to enterprise revenue. So we have our 4 enterprise funds here. You can see the actuals and the budget for all of those going back, with stormwater, of course, starting in FY21. And then down below, we have the general fund subsidies, which most people like to look at these to see how the trend has gone. So, of course, water never has a subsidy. Recreation's been fairly consistent until COVID hit, and then they were one of our most impacted departments. They were subsidized with some ARPA funding too in FY22 and 23, and then of course we got them back to where that subsidy has gone away for the first time in FY26. Ambulance, they're doing better here. The revenues are up, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then the stormwater. We've always been subsidizing them since they started in FY21. The FY22, you see the $392,000 out there. That was because we had bought a street sweeper in May of 2020, right before the enterprise took effect, because our other one broke down. So we did allocate that back to the stormwater enterprise to put that in the correct spot. That was a planned stormwater expense. That was just an accounting issue there. Next slide, Kristen. Here we just have some charts here, just kind of showing like how the enterprise stacks up. So water, of course, is predominant one. For ambulance, I did want to point out that our revenue collection through the first 6 months is $830,000. This is going to break a record this year. I believe last year we were just under 1.3 million, so we're tracking very well. It's a combination of increased rates and increased calls, so it's all around. So, that's good news for the ambulance right now. Next slide, Kristen. And then we have some other available funds. I know there were some questions about this. Two of the most common ones that we use to fund operation or capital needs or any expenses are the Capital Stabilization Fund and the overlay surplus. Capital, of course, we haven't touched that in a while. Last thing I think we appropriated for was the training tower, and there's a little over $568,000 in there currently. The overlay surplus, the Board of Assessors have been allocating about $100,000 a year to offset some costs, which is great. So that's one of the offsets that we do use. And then this little box below is what we're planning for town meeting at this point in time. Just a list of offsets of the funds that we looked at that could actually help to offset costs that are in the town meeting warrant. So the fitness center we do every year for $3,000. The personal services, that's for the nurse, the extra day for the nurse, and then for the East Boston camps security. The road and bush revolving to offset the debt payment for the road and bush. Perpetual care just to offset general expenses for the cemetery. The opioid settlements offsetting the community health inspector, and then the overlay I just said is just offsetting the general budget. So here's our community preservation fund here. This is the complete history going back to 2003. It actually predates me here. So this is the total revenue. I don't know what I'm gonna do next year because I have to consolidate the chart, I think, to finish into years and total them up here. But overall, it's been a very, very good investment for us. The town has raised $35.2 million locally, and we've received $15.7 million from the state. So it's quite a return on investment. In the beginning years, we used to get 100% return, and as more communities came on, we're not seeing those returns. They're quite less, probably 19, 20, 21%, but still a great return on investment there. All right, and using free cash to balance the budget. This is our history here. It used to be common practice for us to use free cash just to plug a gap and make a hard problem just go away. That's not good practice. We want to really, look at the budget and make sure that we're not just plugging gaps using one-time funds. So back in FY15, we did come up with a balanced budget that expenses met revenue heading into town meeting, and surprise, that's right about when we became a AAA community as well. So it's been great practice that we're doing this. There have been a couple blips throughout the years here. Just full disclosure here, in FY21, we did have $352,000 there. in free cash just to balance the budget during that emergency year, and 110,000 of that was the snow and ice deficit, which we didn't raise the previous year. So, besides that, we've been pretty good holding to that practice. So, all right, and the last page, this is just the summary page. Just a note here that the CPA committee has not yet made their recommendations for projects. I believe they'll be doing that on Tuesday night at their meeting. So that's not yet included in the available funds section for FY26. When that is, I will update this presentation and get that out there too. But this is the final summary of how our funds are being allocated.
Thanks, Dan. I had a question on the net increase in state aid. What was that from what you were estimating to what the governor's budget came out at?
Okay. I actually have a separate spreadsheet for that. Let me pull that up real quick.
Okay.
I'll stop
Christina.
sharing.
I thought you said it was like 460 something.
475, I think.
That's a total increase impact, but from what I was estimating, it's 149,000 more to the general fund,
Okay.
which is great. So I thought I was being a little bit aggressive, but then they were even more aggressive than I
Gotcha.
was
Okay.
being. So
That's good.
Great.
let me share this real quick, just
That
so you
won't be
can
a final
take a look.
number until,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
the legislature has to
Yeah.
get a hold of it.
No, it won't be, but. Cross our
I know,
fingers.
but you know, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what this is showing is the FY25 state aid. My original projection in the financial model, the governor's budget, and then the variance. So you can see here I was a little bit short on Chapter 70 and basically everything except for the charter tuition here, and the $4 in state-owned land. I'll own that one. That's fine. And the school choice and public libraries are right on. But we had some substantial savings from what I was projecting for the assessments. They actually went down from FY25, and so the total general fund increase is $149,000,
Okay.
which is great
Thanks.
for what I was projecting.
Yeah. Any other questions on revenue, Dennis?
2 questions. Dan, just a question. As I looked at the enterprise funds, you know, I seem to have a recollection that at one point in time, water enterprise was almost self-sufficient, and I'm looking at it increasing pretty steadily all along over the last few years. What's driving the need for the subsidies for the water enterprise? I assume it's mandates, but what is it?
There is no subsidy for the water enterprise. They're self-subsidized. It's all through water rates.
But we're giving them some money here on the what was the $5 million that it said here on the is that their revenue? Is that what we're talking about?
That's their revenue, yeah.
All right. And then the other way, what is the difference? Just recollection. What's the difference between free cash and the stabilization fund? What separates the two? Or what's the purpose?
So the stabilization fund is sort of considered our rainy day fund. It's a long-term fund that we try to have the 5% minimum invested in that, and we're allowed to invest that money a little longer term, so we get better rates of return. So that fund actually earns interest. The free cash we use each year to actually purchase capital, supplemental budget appropriations, and procure it and things like that. So that's sort of the difference. And for the stabilization, it takes a 2/3 vote for us to appropriate out of that. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Anything else on revenue, Nate?
I saw in there, and you mentioned this, Dan, the Neshoba Valley Tech High School resource officer revenue. Is there any other revenue that comes from the tech? In terms of being the host community and the costs that are associated with that, or is that the
That's
only
it.
thing?
That's it, Nate.
We do get to go to a breakfast tomorrow morning if you're interested.
There's
Sorry,
breakfast
invite
tomorrow
you.
morning. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I forgot about it.
I think Beth has a question.
Oh, go ahead, Beth.
I'm just really happy to see that we're getting funding back from the Fair Share Amendment, the millionaire's tax. So I'm really happy to see that in our state aid that's coming back to Westford and every community in the Commonwealth. So I'm just excited to see that. I am concerned about, you know, the federal government withdrawing support for state for various programs, as we saw last week, and I think that there was a lot of concern of residents in town about like how that would impact town services. I know we don't have specific like federal aid allotted in the revenue here. Do we have any estimates of like what federal aid could be impacted in our ongoing budget?
I can start, Dan, and if you want to supplement. So with the news that came out, you know, late last week, early this week, I've asked all of the department heads to review all of their grants that they have out there that are federally funded. We have some that we get all of the money up front, and then we have other federal grants that are reimbursable. So we're currently sorting through that right now. We did not have a comprehensive list. I think it'll be important to have that comprehensive list and to understand what it affects. We know that some of the funding for the cleanup of 12 North Main Street is affected by federal grants. Some of our transportation through the COA is federally funded. We're asking the schools if they have anything at that point in time as well. So we're coming up with a comprehensive a list for that.
And will we get an update at some point when you have that, Kristen?
Sure, we can do that, yep.
Okay, thanks. John?
Yeah, I understand they withdrew that.
They did, yes.
Yeah.
For now.
Because
For
there
now,
was some
yeah.
confusion
For
in the White House.
Yeah.
So they withdrew it.
But we still just want to be as prepared as possible.
Sure.
My understanding it's only on hold until February 11th, and then I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, but they're also talking about like changing tax structure, and I think that could have impacts on municipal budgets as well. So I just think it's something to be aware of, that there's a lot of changes happening at the federal level that could have impacts on services in Westford.
Yep, and we're reviewing it with NIMCOG, our regional planning agency, because they have several federally funded grants and other organizations that we're working with as well. So we're all monitoring it. We're not being alarmists at this point in time, but keeping a pulse on it to make sure that we have ourselves covered.
I would be most concerned that if there are major changes that impact state funding from the federal government, that impacts the final
Yeah. Yep.
FY26 budget
Yep.
That's right.
in local aid, in Chapter 70 and everything else.
The threat against the educational funds is probably one of the biggest.
Reimbursement to Medicaid would be the big one.
Anything else on revenue? Okay. Thanks, Dan. Do you guys want to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second?
Okay. Scott?
It's motion to adjourn?
Yeah, we already did it. John and I did it.
Oh, okay, so roll call or just aye?
Just say aye. Tom?
I'm three time zones off of mine.
I know you are. I know you're in a totally different time zone. Tom?
Aye.
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 And Chris is on there too, but I don't know if he's gonna
Oh, is
unmute.
Chris, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm an aye.
Okay.
You've been unusually quiet
Thank you
tonight,
very
Chris.
much.
Thanks for coming.
Sorry, guys.
That's all right.
Good night. Thanks. Good night,
night.
everyone.
Good night.
So, moving on to old business. Do we have any old business?
Nice job tonight.
No, we're moving through pretty good.
I had a few things that I have notes on that we were gonna get follow-ups
Okay.
for. Just the rec enterprise year-to-date for FY25. I think either Dan or Michelle was gonna look into seeing if that was easily put together. The Stony Brook wastewater fee for, what's the name of that road by the Stony Brook School, the development there? They pay like a $9,000 fee for the
yes.
wastewater, and you
We
were gonna
did pull
look
that
at.
up. Dan, I think we confirmed that it's $9,000 for the units by Stony Brook School.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you were gonna look to see if there was anything in the paperwork that, like, does that increase over time? Can we renegotiate that?
I didn't see it increasing until next year or the year after, I believe.
Oh, so there's
There is
something
something.
in place?
Yes.
Okay. And then the Council on Aging, that program study, could we get a is that
Their
Is it
facility
public?
study?
The facility,
Sure,
yeah.
Do you have all that written down in a note?
I do.
Could you email
send it
Dan
to
and
you.
I tomorrow?
Sure.
Thank
Yep.
you. We've just
Yep.
been in and out of the office with
No
certain
problem.
things,
Yep,
so
I'll-
that would be really
I can
helpful.
put this in an email. And then just one other thing was, when we first got the budget, we had that, like, update on the sort of the forecast of FY '26 last year as compared to what it came in at. And the police department was like $190,000 off, and I think Dan was gonna give me I've heard him say the breakdown, but I haven't ever written it down, so I just wanted to get that
Okay.
that as well. But I can email that to you.
Sure.
Thanks. Anybody have any other old business? Okay, approval of minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes for January 23rd, 2025.
Great, can I get a second?
Second.
Awesome. So we'll do by roll call. All in favor, Shinji? Okay. Dennis?
Aye.
Nate?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Hari?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
John Fryer?
Aye.
And John Leffers, are you still there?
Still here. Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. So that passes however many we are, 0, 1. Okay. Any other updates for any of our boards, committees, anything new since last week?
We gave you the update on the school committee. They were here last week, and, I mean, it's pretty much, we went and saw them, and, I mean, the two big issues that are pending with them are, they did a good job on the general fund, and the contracts are coming up. We've explained them our concerns, so they're all set to go.
Yeah. I think the next big thing is gonna be the Robinson School Building Committee and the feasibility study, which we'll hear about in a couple
On the
weeks.
13th.
Yeah, on the 13th.
There is a Robinson School Building Committee next Tuesday, the 5th at noon on Zoom, and then the following Tuesday, the 11th at noon on Zoom, if anyone's interested in attending those meetings.
Is that just on Zoom, or is it?
Correct, just on Zoom.
On the 13th?
Nope, so the 5th and the 11th on Zoom at noon, and then they'll be before the Finance Committee to present the article on the 13th of February.
And you mentioned about this stretch code. When is that? When can you?
There is a public forum next Thursday, so I believe that's February 6th at 7 p.m. at the Millennium School and via Zoom. And then you can determine if the Finance Committee is going to make a recommendation on
Yeah,
that.
so I talked to Mike Berlinski, I need to reach back out to him. He wanted to present to us, and I said that he could come to one of our meetings, but because there's no specific dollar amount attached to it, that we probably would not be taking a position on it, a formal position.
Yeah, it'd be good to hear it.
But exactly, it would be good to hear it. So
It's like
if he's
MBTA,
willing-
you heard the
Exactly,
presentation
we did the
last
same
year,
thing
but-
with the MBTA. We didn't take a position, but it was a way to
So he's gonna come, they're gonna
educate us.
come here then?
So he will come to us either on the 13th or the 27th. I need to figure that out, but before that. So I think that's about it. We do not have a meeting next week, so we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll be looking at articles on the warrant at that time.
And you want to be in person in this room on the 13th, or?
I think so, yeah? Continue in person?
Okay,
Sure,
We'll
yeah.
set a hybrid meeting
do
then.
that.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to
Motion
adjourn.
to adjourn.
Second.
Awesome, all right.
Aye.
All in favor, Shinji? Dennis?
Aye.
Aye.
Nate?
Aye.
Shelby? I'm an aye. Hari?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
John Fryer?
Aye.
And John Leffers?
Aye.
Great, okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you.